Hi, welcome to the All Things LGBTQ interview show, where we interview LGBTQ guests who are making important contributions to our communities.
All Things LGBTQ is taped at Orca Media in Montpelier, Vermont, which we recognize as being unceded Indigenous land.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hi, everybody. I'm here with Carolyn Gage, lesbian feminist playwright, a return guest on the show. Welcome, Carolyn.
I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm delighted to see you. It's been a long time. Let me read short portions of your bio, which is very extensive, and rightly so, just in case the audience doesn't know. Carolyn Gage is an autistic playwright, performer, director, and activist. The author of 9 collections of lesbian and feminist-themed plays and 88 plays, musicals, and one-woman shows. She specializes in non-traditional roles for women, especially those reclaiming famous lesbians whose stories have been distorted or erased from history. And we're going to delve into one of those particular figures today.
Yes.
In 2024, Gage won the National Alice B. Award, given annually to living writers who have careers distinguished by consistently well-written stories about lesbians. The award is given once only in appreciation of career achievement. In 2023, Gage was featured in the Dramatist Guild magazine in an issue focused on activism. Her work has been published in 44 anthologies, including 3 Lambda Literary Award winners. Her award-winning play about lesbians at a girls' summer camp, Ugly Ducklings, was the subject of a national documentary and anti-bullying campaign that premiered at the Frameline International Film Festival in San Francisco. And there's much more, but let's me cut to the chase. Carolyn currently lives on Mount Desert Island, where she continues to write and occasionally perform. Welcome again, Carolyn. This is
I'm so happy to be here.
This is so exciting to have you back. But, you know, as we were talking before we taped, I discovered that you last came on twice in 2021. Time has marched on. So let me start off by asking you, what have you been doing for the last 4 years? Seems much shorter.
I had, in 2020, at 68, I was diagnosed as autistic, which was like, it was one of those moments where everything suddenly made sense. But it is quite an adjustment, understanding, yeah, it has been me, not them. And so I wrote a book called the Delilah Journal, and Delilah is an acronym for diagnosed extremely late in life as autistic. So, yeah, it's kind of me journaling like, oh, I did this and I remember this moment. And it's like, oh, you know, it's really a first person, very readable narrative for women diagnosed. These days there's, oh, I was diagnosed late in life, I'm 25, and I'm like, no, honey, no, that's a no. So it's for the extremely late in life, the Delilahs like me. And I wrote Star Pattern. I can't remember if I had written that when I spoke with you. Yes, that was the one.
And we also talked a little about autism in 2021.
No doubt I was talking about it, but now I've written about it. You can get that off my website, the Delilah Journal. And I wrote Reef Point, which is, it's a play about 2 women on the island from the Gilded Age into the 1950s, you know. Then it's kind of the period Downton Abbey covers when suddenly a whole way of life changes. And these family retainers, sometimes multi-generational, are suddenly, you know, buying a laundromat and, you know, going into the merchant class. And there's a big upheaval on the island because there was a fire in 47. So this gradual change of the very, very wealthy suddenly accelerated massively because they didn't come back to build.
What's the name of it?
It's called Reef Point. And it's two ladies' maids, and a lady's maid is it's like the female equivalent of a butler. It's as high as you can go. It's really poignant, though. It's about having to make massive changes very late in life that you didn't expect, which, hello. I think the boomer generation, especially under the current regime, is really looking at that, like, did not just count on this at all. And the question of legacy, it's a very unusual play, and I'm very proud of it. And it's island history, so it's for my
Mount Desert, Island, right? Where you live?
yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't have, yeah, and I think I had written in McClintock's Corn, I believe, because it was in the book Big Play collection. Yeah, so that is basically what I've been working on, that book and those plays.
And there's another play about Georgia O'Keeffe I saw you interview.
Yes, I often discount that because it's an adaptation. I don't write, I write some filler, but it's excerpts from letters between Georgia O'Keeffe. But it did eat up a good maybe 9 months of my writing life. It was a massive project because there's 500 pages of letters, and trying to craft a dramatic narrative out of letters. And back in the day, the letters were often, you'd get 3 of them, and the one you just answered is ancient history, so it just was very difficult to cut and paste them together into anything. But that was a story that shows a side of Georgia O'Keeffe that's very under wraps. She was definitely bisexual, and definitely closeted, and she exploited at least 2 women who seemed to be lesbian cruelly. They worked for her. One of them worked for her for 10 years. The other one worked for her for 30 years. And they were monstrously exploited financially. And so, yeah, I felt it was a very important story, but also very archetypal. The kind of lesbian butch rejected by her mother, attaching herself to an older mother figure woman and crushing out on her, and just grateful for crumbs. Just let me be useful to you. That is all I ask. And I was working with a number of women on this, and it was like, this is really archetypal. We don't have archetypes because, we're not allowed to have a culture that's ever seen, but most butch women, it's like, oh yeah, if I didn't live it, I know women who did. And I knew the women who exploited us. And yeah, so I thought it was important.
You know what it reminded me a little of? Just the format of Sarah Ruhl's play about the letters between Elizabeth Bishop and Robert Lowell.
I've never read that, but I have read both the biography of her about that. Yeah, yeah.
What irritated me, I saw a production of it, so I'm not sure if it was in the script, but it gave Robert Lowell, she has that line, losing you, but write it, the art of losing. And it gave Robert Lowell the pivotal line in the poem. But I mean, maybe this is kind of off down.
In that relationship, she was the one who was kind of kissing up to him. Is that?
Well, it was sort of reciprocal, but he was such an egomaniac.
Okay.
And what I think is, well, we're off on a tangent, but I love it. I like that she stood up for Elizabeth Hardwick when he trashed her, and Adrian Rich also, defended Hardwick when he trashed her in a collection of poetry. But we digress. So I think it's an interesting art form, and I enjoyed hearing you talking about the O'Keeffe play.
And George is very guarded, but it still comes across. It comes across crystal clear in ways that a dramatist probably wouldn't do. I mean, there's something about real life that's not very dramatic, but also goes very deep. These are the letters they wrote to each other. She'd be bearing her soul and in a 4-page epistle, and Georgia comes back with, well, I can't really say anything about that. Now, leave the keys under the blah, 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 and you're just like, I wouldn't put that in a play. That is just mind-bogglingly insensitive. Nobody would believe it. They would think it was poor writing.
Well,
Yeah.
you've got plays, essays, a blog, all kinds of writing. Do you have a writing schedule?
No, I don't. I have chronic fatigue syndrome, and when I have energy, I do things. It's a good thing I'm a writer, because a 9 to 5 job would kill me. Yeah, I write, but I write every day. I make sure I write every day, because if I don't, I have bad mental health. So there's that, um, especially these days. By the way, go read my current blog. I just found out that the first play ever presented in the English language on these shores, immediately all the actors and the playwright were arrested. I'm like, yeah, my heritage, my people. It was public wickedness. So the blog is a playwright reflects on public wickedness and good trouble. I think they're the same things.
Do you
So,
know Paula Vogel's Indecent, speaking of arrest?
yes, I do know that play. Yeah, yeah. And I know the play I'm a huge fan of God of Vengeance. I consider God of Vengeance the most radical lesbian play to this day. I think it was the 20s or 30s. I think it was the 30s when I went to Broadway. To this day, it is still the most radical lesbian work that it was ever on Broadway. It's
And
a
that's the subject of Indecent, just to tell the,
public wickedness.
uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah.
So read Paula Vogel and look at that play if you haven't had a chance. Do you have a writing community?
I don't. And I kind of feel like it might be a function of my age, but it also is a function of being a lesbian writer. I have a low tolerance for listening to heterosexual narratives. Probably overkill.
Sexual what?
Heterosexual
Narrative?
narrative. Yeah. I mean, I'm steeped in it. I'm crowded out. That's the only thing allowed at the table. And I'm kind of tired of it. And then when I do deep lesbian work like Star Pattern, etc., I feel that it doesn't land. And then I think it's poorly written. And I remember you didn't write it for this audience. And it actually is a destructive experience for me to take very sensitive new work, like a little tiny plant that's just starting to grow, and put it in a heterosexual environment. I will come away feeling I don't know how to write. It's just not the audience. It's an audience that, yeah, just is, it's not a great experience for me. So,
So who is your audience then?
and you, it recently became clear to me it was time for me to leave Facebook. I had 5,000 followers and hundreds of colleagues around the world, and I missed that. But it had become unmistakable, unquestionable to me that it was time for me to get off of that platform and delete that account. But I missed that, and I did sometimes write with them in mind. And for many years, I wrote with the Michigan Festival in mind. But more and more, maybe it's just, as you age, and I'm now 70, 73, you focus in like a laser. You're aware I don't have that much time. I don't travel around to find my audience anymore. I don't, that's not how I want to spend the little time I have left. I am very, very focused on getting my interior reality exterior. And it's hard. I certainly am not able to promote it like I did when I was on Facebook or traveling all over. People are just going to have to come find me, damn it, and high time too. Seriously, where are the lesbian theaters? When I started in 85, I thought, well, we just got the bookstores and we're just, yeah, it's coming. We've got cruise ships now. We've got record label. 50 years later, no lesbian theater. I'm heartsick. And I'm also really proud that I soldiered on in a career where there was no audience, no venue, no platform, no press. and I do self-publish and I self-produce and I performed. I did it all for a very long time with shattered health. And I'm extremely proud of that, but I'm also pissed off. Like, come on, ladies, come on. I know queer absolutely killed us for like 30 years, but you know what? It's a different time now. Come on. We need our theaters. We desperately need our theaters. And theater's in the basement, theater in the living room. It's time. It's time, you know?
Did you leave Facebook because of politics, of the political corruption at its
It
core?
became very, very clear to me when they were censoring Heather Cox Richardson, who is one of the most acclaimed historians, who documents every single post, documents. Would they were that scrupulous with everybody, you know, but yeah, they were deleting her posts. And that was where it was clear this is an enormous propaganda platform. And then last week, I found out that a colleague of mine, and we're near the Canadian border, and a couple was coming to visit her and her husband. They stopped the woman at the border and searched her phone, which is legal. They can search absolutely everything at the border. They did not like her social media posts because they were not positive towards Trump, who, by the way, has threatened to invade Canada. She was not allowed to cross the border. And at that point, and also that same week, Trump was bragging that he was using social media of immigrant students who were here on legal visas, but using their social media to deport them. And so it's not only a propaganda channel, but it is the most massive and comprehensive surveillance system that's ever been constructed. And it's being deployed that way now. And it's extremely dangerous. That I just, yes, I mean, like I say, I took a huge social, mental health, financial, career hit leaving that platform. I'd been on it for 20 years. And I thought to myself, how did you let this happen? It started out as revenge porn. It was these college guys and his girlfriend had dumped him, and it's still revenge porn, be clear. And, you know, and yes, there's some lovely things on it, not to mention the puppies and kittens. Oh my God, there's my memory. Yeah, I feel very strongly about that. And I know most people, it's integral to the Island Bulletin Board is a Facebook page. That's who repairs my stuff. That's me buying and selling. That's like where the traffic jams are. That's whose house is on fire. I've lost that now. And I'm just sorry that we got sucked into that. I don't regret leaving it, and I wish everybody would. And they also make it extremely difficult for you to leave it. If you go to the Facebook pages to find out how to cancel your account, it sends you to pages that don't exist and links that aren't there. I had to go on Reddit to find out how to cancel the account.
Same thing happened to me with Twitter. As soon as Musk took over, I tried to get off, and it really, it was kind of hard to do, but I succeeded. But
good for you.
I think we should get to the play.
Yeah, you can cut all that part if you want to.
No. It's all very interesting, don't you think? I love conversation.
It'd probably get me in trouble, but good trouble.
Let's talk about Restel, a play, Restel or Restel?
I think it's Restel, but she's dead. She's not going to tell us how to pronounce it. So, and she made it up anyway. It's a fake French name. So of course it's Restel. Restel. Yes. She's an Irish immigrant with a French, fake name.
So it's an explosive play about 19th century abortionist Madame Restel and her daring escape from the clutches of the notorious anti-vice activist Anthony Comstock. The play features a large and colorful Dickensian cast of characters and explodes with the drama of the Gilded Age in New York City. So let's show a picture of the cover, and we'll
yes. Hold it up again. This is from a series of photographs called Blood in Water, and I wanted an image.
So this is the cover you're talking about.
Yes, I wanted an image that looked like women's blood, which looks very different from if you cut your finger chopping onions, is very watery, or in the case of, miscarriage, breaking water and so on, there's tissue in it. And I got a lot of flack about that cover. And instead of changing the cover, I changed my introduction, and I spent several pages talking about the blood taboo of women's blood, all the different ways it's enacted in our own psyches as well as socially. So I feel like it's already powerful.
Well, let's dig right in, starting with the beginning. You have an introduction that's very informative, but let's go to the two epigraphs that start the play.
All right, so these are two quotations. Again, it's kind of unusual given that we're so threatened with the loss of these rights that people are struggling with this play. Like now more than ever, like, do I need to explain to you? But Giselle Palicot, who was the incredibly heroic woman whose husband was drugging her and then pimping her out to various men and videotaping her for years, 10 years or something, 40 to 70 men. I think the number, I think it was 50 in court, but who knows, outside of court. And she made a really courageous, they were just assuming, we'll keep your name out of the paper. We will close all these hearings. She was like, nope. And then when it came down to the videotape, neither side wanted to show those. And she's like, yes, show the videotape, me snoring, me with sleeping with my mouth open, yes, show the videotapes. And she talks about, that was not easy for her. That was a radical, every bone in her body was like, oh, dear God, no. And it was like, yes, show the videotapes. And she said, shame must change sides. Like, I have nothing to be ashamed. I'm not ashamed of these videos. These men should be drowning in shame. And yeah, and a lot of them, some of them weren't, but a lot of them covered their faces on the way to court. The women are screaming at them, and they seemed to be very ashamed of what they had participated in. And then the second quote is Andrea Dworkin saying, feminism is the politics of anti-abstraction. And in my intro, I talk about how when abortion came up in the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, he went right to states' rights, and I've made everybody happy. This is where it belongs, and blah blah blah. And it was Kamala's turn, and she starts describing a woman who's in the seat of her car, bleeding out in the hospital parking lot. That wouldn't have happened even 5 years ago. I think it's about the Me Too movement and women just finding our voice. In the past, it would be, she would avoid talking like a woman because they're going to be like, well, you say that just because you're a woman. It's like, well, hell yeah, abortion's a woman. She just went there. She went right there. And she went to what a lot of women would just feel like, don't go, that's so female and hysterical and disgusting. And she went there. It's like, what are we talking about here? This is what we're talking about. And then she went right to the 10-year-old who's having trouble finding how to get to another state to have the abortion because it's an incest situation, which it doesn't even matter. She's 10 years old, for God's sake. That is the politics of anti-abstraction. She won that debate hands down, and she won it the second she said the word bleeding out in parking lot, because when somebody's doing all the political speak of states' rights and blah, blah, and someone else is putting up the image of bleeding out in a parking lot, that person's going to win. And we haven't gone there. We as politicians, as women speaking out on the issue, we have not gone there, and we need to go there because feminism is the politics of anti-abstraction. It's our bodies. And they started with the free speech around pornography, and Andrea Dworkin, she spent years studying pornography, and it was really hard on her. And she wrote graphic descriptions of it and was really vilified for doing that. Everybody's safe and comfortable when let's debate it like whether or not it's free speech. She's like, let's talk about the meat grinder, the literal meat grinder. that women are being fed into. Like she was like, let me tell you what it is in case you don't know what it is, because I've looked at it, you know. So
But
yeah.
why Madame Restell? I guess that's sort of an obvious question, but you've been thinking about writing this play for a while, I learned.
Well, you know, she was really interesting because she worked in New York for 40 years and she probably did, you know, multiple abortions per day, each one of them a felony. And she was also the richest woman in New York City, and she was very, very ostentatious about it. She had having a carriage was kind of like having a Lamborghini, and she had several, and she had two stables, not one, which is kind of like buying a whole parking deck for your Lamborghinis. She was met everybody and they stared at her and they talked about her. Everybody knew who she was. She met them eye to eye, eyeball to eyeball. Like shame had changed sides for her. She had seen the results of men's worst behaviors. And she, you know, was aware she was saving women's lives. And I just thought that was interesting. But when I first read about her, it seemed that the day before she was being tried in court, going up against Comstock and was not going to win, she killed herself in a bathtub. And I thought, I don't want to write about women who end up killing themselves. But then the recent biographies just really went into detail about that. And even at the time, most people understood very clearly she's left the country. That body was a plant. That was a already dead body in the bathtub. And my play goes into a lot of the details around that are highly suspicious. And I thought, okay, and of course it was on April Fool's Day that she did it also. And I thought, yeah, that is a good story. That's a good story. I'm going to put that on the stage. So I did.
Well, the cast is mostly white people, but you have an African-American character named John Ward. Can you
Well,
talk?
no, when you say they're white, they're all Irish immigrants. It's 1878. And Restell came over as a poverty-stricken Irish seamstress, and her husband died almost immediately, and she was left with an infant child. So she's surrounded herself, her maid, who's kind of her co-conspirator, is also an Irish immigrant. And of course, her daughter has married an Irish immigrant policeman. And, you know, it's a cast of the Undertaker is an Irish immigrant. So it's an Irish immigrant cast. And then there's Anthony Comstock, the villain. But I felt like if you want to talk about reproductive rights and the lack thereof and who that hit the hardest in 1878, of course, it's women of color. It's Black women specifically, who may have been emancipated, you know, in the letter of the law in 1865, but most of them went into domestic work, where you're in the home of a white person, making the bed in the bedroom. The amount of sexual abuse of domestic workers, and especially African-American women, was enormous. And then if you're pregnant, of course, you're ruined. So good families won't take you on. I mean, it just goes on. And then if you can't pay the rent with this child you're trying to raise, this biracial child that, you know, has no father, often the landlords would exploit that and, you know, demand sexual access to the woman. So now she's got serial pregnancies out of wedlock. You know, it's just, I feel like this story has to have the Black woman's experience in it. So that's when I put John Ward in it.
It complicates the narrative. You know, he brings forth a different idea of the idea of chains, of rings, of weddings, and so forth, which I think is very skillful.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, it's 1878, and of course, enslaved people were not allowed the sacrament of marriage. They were considered chattel. Their profound love and bonding was a kind of animal passion. You know, they had no control. You know, they couldn't stay with their wife. They couldn't prevent wives or children from being sold off. So John has a very particular when the granddaughter of Restel and he are falling in love, and she tells him just flat out, women, when they get married, become, in the eyes of the law, extension of the man. It's called couverture. And they have the legal rights of a child, and they can't control their own money. They have no autonomy over their body. They can be raped anytime by their husband. They can be forced into serial pregnancies, on and on. They can't inherit all of that. And then he schools her on what an incredible, overwhelming, staggering privilege it is just to be able to be married, from his perspective, as someone who's coming out of generations of enslavement. So yeah, it is a complicated conversation and a fraught one. And she says, well, a ring is just the first link in a chain. And he's like, don't know. A chain is not a metaphor. My grandfather wore a chain. It's like, don't. So they're both really hot under the collar. And marriage means something to him. To her, it's a loss of freedom. To him, it's an acquisition of privilege that is given to the free. I felt like it was important to have that conversation, but it was problematic to sort of drop an African-American figure into an Irish immigrant play. And the first draft of the play, it looked like that. It looked like, oh, this is a white character, but I'm just going to make him black to complicate the. I rewrote the play and I made him a central figure, and he has the whole second scene of the play to really answer the question, why in God's name would a person of color want to work with Anthony Comstock and attach himself to this Irish immigrant family? And then we hear the story of his twin sister and what happened to her, and she's a suicide from multiple rapes. But he has, it's really largely his play now, and that to me felt, I think that it was never my intention, but I felt like he looked tokenized in the first draft. And I feel like in the second draft, it's like, yes, he's still the one person of color in this Irish immigrant. But remember, the Irish immigrants aren't great in New York in 1878. They got the sign, the Irish need not apply and all that. But I felt like it's hard to say it's a token character when you actually give them the play. So I'm hoping to get around that perception, because I just did not want to lose putting the Black woman's narrative central when we talk about an era before birth control and before abortion.
And that I was able to privileged enough to read a couple of drafts of this.
What did you think between the first and the second draft? Because I felt like I just didn't want to give up on John, and everybody's like, just make him another Irish immigrant and then you won't look racist. And it was kind of like,
I thought the scene that you put in deepened the narrative, and because there were glimmers of what they call intersectionality. It's a bad word, but an important concept. There were glimmers of it, but I think that makes it a little more concrete, that you give him some background. One thing I did notice between revisions, and this is a quirky thing, but you quote King Lear, and in the original you say quoting King Lear, but then in the revision you say Shakespearean Lee or something like that.
well, the line is easy to memorize. Never, 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 never. And I thought, you don't need to know it's from King Lear, but she's feigning mental illness in order to make the attempted suicide look more motivated. But yeah. But one of the things about John, and it's something that I've experienced working in communities with survivors, is that when your life has kind of been derailed by massive trauma, as he would with this, finding out after the fact that his sister hanged herself, and felt because of shame she couldn't tell the family the situation she was in, and he's devastated. And in the scene that is new, and it now introduces the play, he's explaining to his little brother, they're in business together, and he's explaining why he's leaving that to go work for Anthony Comstock. And he's explaining that after his sister's death, he says, I have to be a different man now. I have to find something different to do with my life. And I find a lot of survivors go and work with survivors. It's like veterans. they go and they come back and they don't pick up the job they had, before they went to Vietnam. They come back and they spend their life, they become a therapist, or they do emergency nursing, or they work in the Veterans Administration. They find some kind of work to give meaning to their trauma. And to me, it's like, it explains everything about, well, what old Black man would want to blah, blah. It's like, he's trying to tell you, I have to find work. And he now is like, I'm going to go murder her perpetrators if I don't, and of course won't
It
end
sort of
well.
explains his kind of quick conversion to Restell's cause. If that,
Well, and he's clear, this woman puts her life on the line 6 times a day. She has a half a dozen felonies before the sun goes down every single day. And as he said, if my sister had found her way to Madame Restel, she'd be alive today. And and she doesn't, yes, she makes a lot of money off it, but she is greatly at risk. And I think he has respect for that. She is risking her life to save women like his sister. And he's like, yeah, sign me up for this family. Sign me up. They're on his issues. And I feel like that when you've been severely traumatized, it's like he says, I have to become a different man now. It's not, I can't go back to, he has to redeem his sister's death with his life in some way. And I feel that in my own life and work. So that was terribly important to me. And I felt like it gives him the weight and answers a whole lot of questions about, this is just unbelievable. Let's drop a person of color in here to, it's like,
right.
Anyway, I'm hoping.
Speaking of revisions, how do you know when a play is finished?
There's just some, for me, I guess, when it's published by, it gets out in the world, and you don't want to have a play that's out in the world in 75 different versions. But I do revise for the first couple of years. Almost every time I see a play, I make revisions in it. And because I self-publish, it's very easy for me to do that. Yeah, there just comes a point, I think, when you really see it land. And if you see it done with really good actors and it's not working, then you keep working. There's something wrong with it. I haven't seen it read professionally, and I'm very, very much trying to have that happen. It's an old-fashioned, well-made 19th century play about a very radical subject, and I'm hoping to see if it works or not. And so far, the jury has been out. Like I say, a lot of my friends feel like the melodramatic elements of the play make light of abortion rights. And I'm like, here, I copied this for you. This is Emma Goldman. This is my defense of Restel and what I'm trying to do with it. Any mode of creative work which with true perception portrays social wrongs earnestly and boldly, may be a greater menace to our social fabric and a more powerful inspiration than the wildest harangue of the soapbox orator. A well-made play that keeps people on the edge of their seat, and the romance is powerful, and they're swooning when they kiss. And this one has a steamer trunk, and the second the steamer trunk comes on, there's going to be a body in it taken off. Why else would you have a steamer trunk on stage? All of that, to me, that's part of the power of it. And along the way, with this whiz-bang plot and the romance and the suspense and the steamer trunk, you are getting a boatload of information about miscarriage, about botched abortions, about the literal technique of the abortion itself, the blood, all of it. That's coming through. It's like South Pacific. Nobody really thinks of it as a social change play. They're thinking Some Enchanted Evening and This Nearly Was Paradise and Wash That Man. I mean, it's all about interracial marriage. It's about biracial children. It's about out of wedlock children. It is all about that. But it goes right by because it's a great plot. It's got a bunch of plots, and the music is gorgeous. And this is just a really well-made Perils of Pauline. Will she get out alive? Will she not? Cliffhanger, all of that romance. It's a great play. It's a good evening in the theater. And oh, by the way, I think you're not ever going to think about abortion rights the same way again, because it's not like an experiment. We lived through an era when there was no contraception or abortion, and it was hell on earth. One of the biggest points I make in the play, and there's a Dickens character, this Irish old guy who is the undertaker, and he enlightens us. He sees the family secrets, and he is well aware that almost all of the young women who pass through his basement are 5 months pregnant, which is the point where you're showing. And he's like, these girls didn't want to die. They waited until it was absolutely inevitable. They waited till the 5th month when it couldn't be kept secret anymore. And furthermore, as he states, these bodies that come in and the family says it's a suicide, he's like, I'm here to tell you they're not. You know, they've been hanged, but I can see the handprint around the neck under the rope. They're drowned, but I cut them open. There's no water in the lungs. You know, they're poisoned, but it's a slow poison. Nobody kills themselves with a 3-week poison. No, nobody does that. I mean, it was like, it's just, he's telling us the part of 1878 we don't see is like, you know, these girls, you know, the world never knows they're pregnant. Maybe the family does, but you know, and he says like, and who kills them? Their employer, the father of the child, a member of the family, the brother, you know, like, you know, it's just that time, that era is full of nasty secrets. And all these young women went to their graves, not helping the cause at all, not becoming a statistic because nobody knew they were pregnant.
And part of the way he conveys that message is through a death ritual that he kind of prays after them, which is very skillful, I think.
Yeah, that he says he does a little thing with a candle, and he bears witness that they were murdered, even if they took their lives. It's like the society killed you, and that you are innocent, you know, and I'm bearing witness. And he didn't want them to go to the grave with nobody knowing they were with child. It's like, I bear witness.
Right.
Yeah, and if we had the stats of that, it would be a powerful and persuasive thing in the argument for abortion rights. But we don't. Those are just, I don't know, 500,000 dead 16-year-olds. Depressed, I guess, just depressed. Yeah, that and I want to write that back into the record, just because you don't hear about it. You know, we as women know that these girls were desperate. They were going to ruin their families. They would have no life after that. They'd have to raise their rapists or their father's child or whatever. You know, they're done. They're just done. And yeah, I feel obviously very strongly about it.
It's dramatized by another sort of minor character who has a heartbreaking story that we won't spoil for the audience.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Yes, I kind of wanted to make the point. It's not all raped 16-year-olds.
Right, right.
Poverty, you know, so there's a woman of high social status who actually believed she was postmenopausal.
Mhm, mhm.
But the consequences for her are the same, and she's preferring death to the absolute ruin of her daughter, of her granddaughter, of her son-in-law, of, you know,
Mhm,
it's almost like she has a social obligation to her family to off herself.
mhm.
Yeah. Oof.
So what are you working on now to change the subject?
I'm working on a play that is so new. It's only 2 days old, and I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but it is absolutely, it's a play I tried to write earlier in the year, and I was overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed and unable to write it. And I thought, this play is so hard hitting. I'm not going to be able in my lifetime to be able to write it. And then I kind of did what all of us did. I understood what is happening in my country, and that the way I was living, like John says, I have to be a different person now.
Right.
I have to. The person I've been coasting into old age. No. And I made a whole bunch of very radical changes in my life, not least of which was the Facebook decision. And suddenly I felt a little voice that said, now you're ready to write that play that you were too frightened to write. And it's true. I'm writing it. And I think it's, when you think of radical as going to the root of things, the play I'm working on now is absolutely the most radical play I have ever written. And it's actually kind of comedic because like Oscar Wilde said, if you want to tell people the truth, you better make them laugh because they'll kill you. And this play is that bad. It has to be funny. But I gave up on it in January. I just felt like I don't have it in me to write this. It'll kill me. And so now I feel really kind of like, it feels wonderful that I'm called to write it and I'm showing up for it because I couldn't show up for it in January. So I obviously made some kind of transition or adjustment that was powerful. Yay, me. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're drawing to a close.
Let me say
This
what
has been-
I had a second point I wanted to make. Restel is a big play. It has 16 roles. You can probably do it with 10 actors, but it's a big cast. But Cory Booker, who gave me life, who actually was the beginning of my turnaround, he says, if you want extraordinary results, you have to put in extraordinary efforts. This is an incredibly difficult issue for a lot of people.
Well, reproductive rights or
Yes, reproductive rights. It's fraught. It's personally fraught. It's historically fraught. And this is a big play. It's going to take some money. It's going to take a lot of actors. And I encourage people anyway, read it in your living room. Because, if you want extraordinary results, you have to put in extraordinary efforts. And I have written a play you don't need a steamer trunk if you just do a reading, but I do have the steamer trunk, just ask. But anyway, I just want to give that a plea because these days writing a big play, a full-length play with a large cast, lots of scene changes, set in the Gilded Age is like, oh my God, who do you think you are, the BBC? And it's like, no, I'm a lot of desperate women. That's who I am. This is a big effort play. And trust me, if you make that big effort, you're going to get an extraordinary result. There's never been a play in the history of women's writing that does what Restel does, and it does it really well. But it's going to take extraordinary effort. So I just wanted to say that without apology. It's intentionally a strenuous play.
Cory Booker initiated a sea change for you.
Cory Booker was shamanistic. Cory Booker stood up, and the record he wanted to break was a racist rant filibuster by Strom, what's his face? And he called in the ancestors. His church was praying for him. The halls were full, especially those last couple of hours. Like, he was calling in the spirits from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. He was calling in his people. What he did was a superhuman. It's not like, oh, Cory Booker is Superman. It's like he was shamanistic. It was like in the Bible when, they're holding up Moses's arms. He was being held up and he was channeling. And every minute, he's not reading the fucking phone book like a lot of them did. Every minute you tuned in, it sounded like he was at the high point of a political speech. He was hot for 24 hours solid. He was hot. Like, what he did was one of the most amazing spiritual feats of spiritual fortitude, etc. I feel like if there's a ship of state and it's sitting under the rotunda, I felt it come about in the wind when he did that. And I felt it come about inside me. He was like in that part of the Bible when Elijah and his assistants freaking out because the army's, he's like, look up at the hills. And they see all these like spiritual chariots just surrounding the whole valley. He's like, they that are with us are more than those who are against us. Cory Booker did that. And it was like, I saw it. I looked up and I saw the chariots. It's like, we outnumber them monstrously, spiritually, physically. Like, it was, yes, I can't say enough about, and Cory Booker takes money from horrible people, and I disagree with him on many things. But I'm telling you, he brought it. He brought it like a shaman, and he wasn't Cory Booker when he did it. He was and he wasn't, but it was like, it was phenomenal. It should never, ever be forgotten what he did. And to avoid the stigma of diapers, which Trump would have loved, that man did it dehydrated. He was fasting 48 hours and dehydrated 24 when he went into it. It was just a spiritual feat. Well, listen to me. I'm telling you, he brought it. Didn't you
Well,
think so? Didn't you think so?
I didn't watch it, but I heard about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Drop into any time of it, and you're just amazed. He never flagged. He was just on fire for 24 hours. It's amazing. It's a stunning display of spiritual fortitude and certitude. You know, he was righteous. He was fucking righteous. Oh my God. Yeah.
Carolyn, now we are getting to the end, but before we leave, let me ask you if you have any concluding commentary or last words or valedictory remarks for our audience.
Please begin to consider reading my plays in your living room with your friends.
And where can we get them?
www.carolyngage.com, which you can find my email on there, which is carolyn@carolyngage.com. Email me, and I'm happy to send you the PDFs. You can print them out on the cheap, or I can order them for you, or you can order them. You can get them in PDF or ebook or Kindle or paperback. I self-publish everything because I had to, but here we are. It's tragic we don't have our own theaters. It's really tragic. They are so powerful. It is a tool we have left on the table. I'm showing up for it, and I say you show up for it too.
We meaning lesbians or?
Lesbians. Absolutely. We sat back and let gay men make our movies, and we know what those were. Yeah, it's or straight people make our movies. And in theater, I feel like we never really arrived. Please don't start with Fun Home, because it lifts up a perpetrator. I can't even go there. I have a blog about that if you want to. But yeah, I feel it's just such a powerful medium. It's why he went after the Kennedy Center. He knew it's incredibly powerful. Yeah.
And also theater has got to be affordable. It is in many venues, but
And it's not film. You don't need money. You can read it with a bunch of 60-year-old women in your living room reading Young Men of Color. You can read this play and hear it, because plays harness the power of the imagination in a way that films don't. They put it all out there for you. Yeah, so that is my urgent plea.
Carolyn Gage, lesbian feminist playwright, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And until next time, remember, resist.